Welcome to the Trailhead from Ultra Sign Up, where big adventures begin. Trail running is so much more than just a sport. It's a community, a culture, a way of seeing the world. On this show, we're not dissecting splits or debating shoe specs. We're here to get to the heart of it all, the people, the places, and the stories that speak to the soul of the sport. Join me, Zoe Rome, and my co-host, Brendan Leonard, as we'll bring you conversations with the everyday athletes, local legends, quirky characters, and creative minds who make trail running what it is. Messy, joyful, gritty, and deeply human. Because it's not just about chasing finish lines. It's about the friendships forged on long climbs, the lessons learned in the pain cave, and the weird, wild moments that remind us why this sport is about so much more than the miles. This episode is brought to you by Element, and specifically their new lemonade iced tea flavor, which has been doing some quiet work on a couple of, let's say, low-stakes self-improvement projects of mine this year. Project 1, drink enough water like a person who has been told repeatedly this is something a human body needs. Project 2, stop having coffee at 4 p.m. and then feeling personally betrayed at 11 p.m. when I am still somehow shockingly awake. Lemonade iced tea is conveniently and possibly suspiciously a solution to both. It has 50 milligrams of caffeine from actual tea, which is less than a cup of coffee, plus L-theanine, which is a compound in tea that keeps your nervous system from filing a service complaint, and the same sodium, potassium, magnesium formula as regular Element. And it tastes like an Arnold Palmer, like somebody made it on a porch iced tea. As a Southerner, I feel this deeply. It's not the kind of beverage where you can taste the optimization and it goes down as smooth as a liquid TED Talk. Go to drinkelement.com/ultrasignup for a free sample pack with any order. That's drinkelement.com/ultrasignup. Brendan, what's a dumb idea in running that you have fallen for?
This is like a nutrition sort of thing, but for years, I have gotten up in the morning and drunk a liter of water before I drink coffee or eat breakfast. And I think a lot of it, this is from just living in Colorado for 15 years and being in dry air. It was much higher altitude than where I grew up. And
you have to waterboard yourself every morning.
Doing the right thing. This is like jumpstarts my digestive system, etc. And I literally just learned this like 2-3 weeks ago. I was researching stuff and it was like, I read this article about like how your body keeps you from getting dehydrated while you sleep. And it was like, no, you don't need to get up and drink a liter of water. And I was like, oh my God. Because I was doing this for probably 15, 17 years, something like that. And I'd be like dropping my kid off at school and going to go for my run. I'd be like, I got to run by a bathroom because I'm not going to make it through this like hour having to pee this bad. Because I would have this 30 liter of water and then like a couple big cups of coffee and be like, yeah. So I've learned that, and I'm still drinking a little bit of water before I get up. But like,
little's probably good.
Yeah. How about you?
Probably no need to be water maxing. I went through a ketones phase, as many ultra runners do. It was when I was working part-time on a TV show and commuting back and forth from the mountains and the Front Range and was feeling pretty stressed. And I started seeing ads on my Instagram for this mystical substance that tastes like something you would use to power a jet ski. And so I clicked the link in bio and bought some ketones. And I didn't feel worse. And I think that I started to build up this almost like superstition that as long as I was like taking in ketones, I could do as much training as I wanted without being particularly careful around my health. And I kind of continued to get away with some suboptimal training and like stress management habits and sort of continued to take ketones. And I got like a little afraid to wean myself off them at the end, even though I knew like the ketones aren't doing any, like the way that I am using them makes no sense. And they are not cheap.
Wow. I don't even know what they are. Like, and I feel like I don't see this sort of stuff. You know, I get like, they'll see the ads and be like, are you low testosterone? I'm like, probably. I'm 47 years
Props, yeah,
old.
dude.
Like, it's just the way it goes. Like, should I feel bad about it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. Yes, I use social media. Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
sandwiched between videos of puppy and then dance TikToks. I ultimately became very glad to divest myself from that whole thing. And the TLDR of it all was that the ketones were not at all doing anything for me.
Hmm.
And that's okay because now I no longer need to spend $80 a month on rocket fuel for no real reason.
Yeah. You can use it. You can use that money to buy cocaine now instead.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Something that works, something that, like, in a double blinded study, I would know, you know?
Yeah.
Don't need a Cochrane review for that one.
Great. Well, our guest today, Nick Tiller, he's a pretty steady rhythm of calling out, you know, things that don't work that are being sold to us. And I'm very excited to talk to him about things that we know may not work or are very skeptical of, because he seems to
Yeah.
make me feel better about not, you know, things like ketones that I don't need.
Are there any other myths that you've had busted or habits you've kicked, things you've stopped believing in over the course of your running career?
Compression socks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also
Everyone goes through that phase.
that I would be fine running long distances without electrolytes. That's something I'm happy to have converted over to. Yeah. Yeah, those are the big ones.
Well, I'm excited to talk to Dr. Tiller. Let's get into it.
I'm Nick Tiller. I'm a research associate at the Lundquist Institute at Harbor-UCLA Medical Center. Among other things, I like to research ultra and trail running physiology and pathophysiology, and that really combines my personal, I guess my personal passion for ultra running, which I've been doing for about, I would say, getting on for 2 decades now, and my professional work in exercise science and exercise physiology. I'm trying to bring the two worlds of, I guess, ultra running and critical thinking a little bit closer together. There's not really enough critical thinking and skepticism in the ultra and trail running community. So that's something that I'm really trying to combine those two worlds.
Yeah, I guess that was going to be my first question is, do those things feel uncomfortably far apart sometimes? The world of critical thinking and running extremely long distances.
Yeah, for sure. Like in health and wellness, health and fitness in general. Like if they're almost two ends of the spectrum. You know, I've written a lot extensively about the health and fitness industry and how it's lacking critical thinking and scientific skepticism. And it really comes down to lax regulations in the industry and people being sold all of these shortcuts and quick fixes that promise to expedite them to their goals, but really they're not beholden to any kind of scientific evidence, or there's no scrutiny of the claims. And it's especially prevalent in, I'd say, marathon, long distance running, marathon, ultra trail running, because people are so passionate about their sport. You know, it's not the kind of sport, it's not the kind of vocation that you can do half-heartedly. You've sort of got to be all in to do it, because you can't go and run 50 miles, 100 miles, 200 miles just on a whim. You have to put in the time. You have to train for it. Otherwise, you're not going to finish. You're going to do yourself serious harm or serious injury. So people are, I think, necessarily, they are very passionate about what they do and very serious, but that makes them a little bit more susceptible to falling for misinformation and falling for baseless claims. So yeah, I definitely got my work cut out in this area.
Good job, security, because for ultra running, in
Yeah.
for a penny, in for a pound and a
Right.
half of sodium bicarb.
Exactly.
I had a big question right off the bat here. This is just at my preschoolers soccer practice last night. Our friend, you know, who's also a trail runner, ultra marathon runner, said to me that he had just had a doctor's appointment with his general practitioner. He's like, and I love this doctor, it gets me. But he said, you know, ultra running is not necessarily good for you. If you just wanted to be fit, you could just work out, you know, do resistance training a couple times a week and then run 4 miles 4 times a week the rest of your life. And that'd be a really good way to do it. And then we had this whole discussion about like, well, yeah, but that wouldn't be very fun, you know?
It wouldn't be.
So I guess my question, what is your take on that, that idea? Like, yeah, it's not, you know, like the best thing for you. Is that?
There's no question. Ultra running is not good for you at all. Are you,
Wish you
are you
could have even
serious?
indulged us with like a pretend pause,
You
but
kidding
great.
me? Like, as far as exercising for health and wellness and physical condition, it's very difficult to say where the optimum range is, but it's probably around like an hour of exercise a day. If you were to do an hour of aerobic exercise training a day, 5 days a week, maybe about 300 minutes of aerobic type training, that's where you're going. That's probably the sweet spot in terms of the cardiovascular benefit. Obviously, you won't maximize your fitness, but once your VO2 max gets into the low 50s, mid 50s, something like that, that you're pretty much maxing out the cardiovascular benefits. There's no protective effect of having a VO2 max in the 60s, 70s, 80s, right? It's just that's just not how the body works. And I would go a step further and say that periodically going out and running for 24 hours, 48 hours, and evoking this kind of extreme oxidative stress and inflammation and muscle injury and cardiovascular strain and respiratory muscle fatigue and airway inflammation and digestive distress and all of these kinds of things. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely not good for you. So I don't think, but I don't think ultra runners are under any illusion about, ultra runners are also, in my experience, are a decidedly smart bunch. They tend to know the benefits and risks of the sport. But if you look at the research on this, like Marty Hoffman published a study a few years ago now, who's the former medical director of Western States, and he and his group published this research. And it was a very simple survey, and they asked ultra runners, I think there was like 1,200 of them, if you were to find out for absolute certainty that ultra running was bad for your health, it was actually causing you harm, would you stop competing in ultra running? And 75% of runners said, no, of course I wouldn't stop running. Because this is not something this is not something people do necessarily for their health or for their fitness or anything like that. They do it because they love the sport. And what I've tried to do more and more in recent years is be realistic and try and encourage people to participate in this sport, because it's taught me so much about who I am, and it's taken me on some incredible journeys and amazing adventures. And I've met some awesome people that I've known for decades now, just through running. And I would never go back in time and decide not to participate in this sport. But at the same time, it is inherently risky, and we have to do it making good decisions. We have to do it intelligently. We have to do it minimizing the risks and making decisions that can maximize our longevity. So rather than going out and running 100 miles once a month, which I know several people that like to do that. That's their hobby, if you like, and that's kind of their social circle is the ultra running community. You could be more selective with the races that you participate in. Make sure you train for it and taper, and then have some time off. You fully recover, and then build up for the next race. You can be a little bit more mindful about how often you race, and choosing races that maybe complement your existing skill set and your existing, I guess, physiological predisposition. So there are lots of things that we can do to reduce the risks, maximize longevity. And I would never discourage someone from doing this sport, but we've got to do it intelligently.
Yeah, thoughts and prayers for the endocrine systems of everyone running a monthly ultra out there.
But there's lots of them though. It's crazy.
God bless.
You don't even think about it. I used to follow this girl on Instagram, for instance, and her whole thing was that she went and did 100 miler every month because she loved posting about it, and she loved the feedback, and she loved, I guess, the notoriety that it got her. But it's definitely not doing you any good to run these races. Maybe it's doing you good from a mental and social perspective. Physically,
tell that to my Strava kudos, Professor.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
To that point, you're an ultra runner yourself. How did running come into your life, and how does your personal relationship to the sport shape what you're interested in terms of your research? Because those things often overlap.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was never a very good runner as a youngster. I remember doing cross country when I was at school. We're talking at 15, 16 years, and I was always the back third of the pack. I always struggled around. I didn't enjoy it. And I was always kind of just, okay, let's just get this over with kind of thing. And it was because I wasn't very good at it. Okay, admittedly, it's not something that I ever trained properly, but I never enjoyed it. I didn't have a natural affinity for running. So as soon as I turned 18, and in the UK where I lived at the time, you have to be 18, a minimum of 18 years to enter a marathon. So as soon as I turned 18, I entered the London Marathon. because it's one of the world's biggest, of course, and it wasn't so far from where I lived. I knew a couple of people that had run the race. My next door neighbor at the time had run the race the year before me. And I just thought, what better way to overcome this difficulty I have with distance running than to enter a marathon and tackle it hard? I guess that's the kind of person I am. It's probably the kind of disposition that most ultra runners have. You have to have that kind of type A personality. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to sustain the rigors of the training and the racing, right? So I did my first marathon in 2001, and as the saying goes, I got the bug. I was hit with the bug, and I loved it. I loved testing myself physically and mentally, and there was something very, very addictive about setting yourself this challenge that you didn't know if you could accomplish, something that was out of your comfort zone, something you'd never done before, and then dedicating yourself to it and training for it and accomplishing it. And then there was this positive feedback loop, right? And so, yeah, I was addicted from then on, and I did a bunch of marathons and then got into triathlon, did Ironman for a little while, and then got into ultra running, and just, yeah, it snowballed from there. And from then I did some stage races, did Marathon Day Sub back in 2011 now, that's going back a while, and then did some 50s and some 100 milers. I've never done anything longer than a 100 miler. I've never felt the need to, really. It's not really appealed to me. But yeah, and then sort of circling back to the second part of your question, it's as I sort of alluded to at the start, it's taught me so much about myself in terms of what I'm capable of, and that basic understanding of being able to commit myself to something, and that realization that if I set myself a challenge and I dedicate time to it and I work at it and I train for it, then I can accomplish something, which is very cliche, it's very corny, but that's like a metaphor for life, isn't it? If you just set yourself a challenge and work at it, you can accomplish your dreams, and that was kind of the whole my whole ethos for wanting to be a runner. And then when I really became a qualified exercise scientist with my PhD, it was an opportunity to then have a bit more flexibility with what I studied, and was just a great opportunity to bring some of my professional outlook to my personal passion.
What did that actually look like when you go from PhD? I'm assuming the timing is that you've already started running ultra marathons when you do your PhD. Yep. How did that? It's not like you applied for a job and you're like, I want to study. Like you found a job listing that said we need a PhD to study endurance and ultra marathon running. How did that? Yeah, don't we all? How did that come about then? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, good question. And I remember starting my PhD in January 2011, and then 6 weeks later, I left for a month to go and do Marathon Day Sub through the Sahara. So my supervisor was never best pleased with me about that. He never let that go. But yeah, it was very much a part of my life back then. And really, the main opportunity, like you quite rightly say, PhDs really depend on funding. So you're either going to fund yourself to do the PhD, pay your tuition and so forth, which some people can do, but it's a luxury if you can afford to do that, especially in the States because it's super expensive. Slightly less so in the UK, but still expensive. In Norway, where I live now, they actually pay you to do a PhD, which is another discussion entirely. But so there isn't really any funding to go and do a PhD in this area because it's just not considered that important. The stuff that, and I sympathize with that. If you're going to, there's only limited funding to go around. So people are funding PhDs in looking at disease risk and pathophysiology and that kind of stuff. So I get that. But it was when I became an assistant and then associate professor in the UK, this was 2015. So I just finished my PhD, went into a faculty position, and the core of my job was teaching and all the boring stuff, grading papers and stuff. But within that, I was given a certain block of time to be a researcher. And I thought, okay, well, my PhD was all focused on respiratory physiology, respiratory medicine, breathing mechanics. This is an opportunity for me to study whatever I like. So it didn't take me long to kind of settle on, okay, let's try and contribute to the literature on ultra marathon physiology because there's just not very much stuff out there. It's a growing body of evidence. There's a lot of low quality research in ultra marathon physiology because it's relatively small sample sizes. A lot of stuff is done out in the field where it's very difficult to get very good mechanistic data for various reasons. But it was an opportunity for me to kind of insert myself into this evidence base and actually start contributing to our understanding of ultra endurance physiology. So that was kind of my that was stepping over the threshold, so to speak. That was how I started to explore this area professionally.
The further we go in distance, thank God I don't need to be a part of a study on anyone running longer than 100 miles, but the body becomes a system that science doesn't fully understand at these really extreme distances. What are the open questions that we have right now that you think are the most interesting?
Yeah, you make a really good point in that the further you go, there are so many different factors that come into play that the science really starts to break down. Like in marathon, for example, we can predict marathon performance with pretty much three key variables. It's the traditional marathon physiology model. It's knowing if you know somebody's VO2 max, their lactate threshold, and their running economy, you can pretty much predict their marathon finish time, save for, getting some catastrophic injury or something like that. But when you get into the longer distances, there are too many factors going on. It becomes less about physiology. The psychological component becomes so much more important. It's like how much of the external stress can you sustain? Can you run for 24 hours without losing your mind? Can you offset the inevitable gastrointestinal upset that causes many people to finish? There's the sleep deprivation. A lot of people end up hallucinating if they're running for more than 24 hours. The muscle damage and inflammation, trying to figure out your nutritional strategy, the dehydration, making sure you don't become hyponatremic. So thinking about if you need to supplement with electrolytes or make sure you get it in your food. So there's so many different things going on that it's impossible to predict with a scientific model. So I guess the one thing that I would really like to understand more about is what the key determinants of performance in ultramarathon are. I think it's probably going to be different for different groups of people. So there's going to be a huge psychological component. I think aerobic fitness plays a role, but it's a relatively minor role, certainly compared to marathon and shorter distances. And I wrote a paper with Guy Millet of the University of St. Etienne a year or two ago called Decoding Ultramarathon Muscle Damage as the Main Limiting Factor to Performance. And whereas I wouldn't say that it's possible to predict ultramarathon performance with that one factor, but I think once you get into the long distance races, more than 50 miles, say, most people, save for the the elite of the elite, are going to complain of muscle damage and inflammation. And invariably, that is probably what limits performance more than anything else, more than VO2 max, more than running economy, probably more than gastrointestinal upset, because all of these things you can prepare for. So, yeah, I would really like to know what the key determinants of performance in ultramarathon are and how we can overcome those limitations, and also how we can make the sport safer, not just in terms of kind of controlling for environmental factors, but there's emerging research now that if you participate in these kinds of extreme races for many, many years, 10, 15, 20 years or longer, so sort of described as lifelong endurance athletes, can be associated with a little bit of cardiovascular dysfunction, scarring of the heart tissue, what we call myocardial fibrosis, maybe cardiac arrhythmias as well. So I'd love to I think we need more literature and understanding how to mitigate those risks so that people can enhance their longevity in the sport, keep racing into their 50s, 60s, 70s, and they don't have to hang up their trail shoes prematurely because they got injured or, for some other reason. So those are the kind of the two areas that I think really the research needs to, tap into a little bit more.
You've been on a lot of podcasts as a guest and expert, and I think a lot of people's we're not necessarily doing that today, but I feel like they come to you and say, Nick, is this bullshit or not? This health thing or this thing, and it's a crazy time to try to learn anything, or how susceptible we all are and how much media we all consume. I'm wondering, what are some signs in, say, 2026 that kind of trip off your bullshit detector that everyone can kind of use to be like, oh, maybe that's not true? Like, are there things that you've spotted where you're like, let's look a little further into this? And How does that work for you?
Yeah, definitely that in this day and age, the general rule of thumb is that if somebody's offering you a way to expedite or shortcut something, your health, your wellness, your fitness, your training, it's probably bullshit. I think that is a pretty good rule of thumb. Unfortunately, we live in this information age, especially with social media, where information is shared and information spreads not because it's true, but because it's popular or because it resonates in some way. And actually, if something trends online, it's less likely to be true. It's more likely to be embellished or completely fabricated because it's the sensational stuff, the stuff that goes against the grain, especially against the kind of scientific consensus. That's the stuff that ends up being more popular. That's the stuff that trends. So if something is, unfortunately, if something is trendy, if something claims to expedite your training, your processes, your health, then it's probably going to be bullshit. In terms of trying to answer your question, is like in terms of the the red flags that I would look for. First of all, if somebody tries to sell you something on a logical fallacy, so invest in this product because it's popular, or wear this particular type of shoe because it's how your ancestors, it's the footwear that your ancestors used to use, or you should follow this kind of diet because it's natural and healthy, and and it's everything in it is green. These are all what we call informal logical fallacies, where we're tapping into people's biases. And the claims themselves can be evaluated. You can look at a particular diet and you can look at the scientific evidence, or speak to a dietitian or a qualified nutritionist. You can ask them, is this a healthy way to eat? Is this going to satisfy my nutritional demands? But the fallacy is to sell you that diet or that supplement or that training program because it's popular, because everyone does it, because it's been around for a long time, which is what we call the appeal to tradition. Do something because it's old. Use acupuncture because it's been around for a long time, right? It's been around for thousands of years. Something that old must be right. Yeah. Well, actually, I'd prefer to use something because it works and not because it's been around for a long time. So that's kind of one red flag, is if somebody's selling you something because rather than on evidence and rather than on proof. So that's kind of one issue. I would also look at the type of people who are administering the information. More often than not, we're taking advice too often from fitness influencers, wellness gurus who are just not qualified, And the example, the analogy I give is everybody's more than happy to lean on expert advice when the shit hits the fan. So if you bust your shoulder and you need a surgery, you're going to go to an expert surgeon. And then if you need to do rehab, you're going to go to an expert physio. If, heaven forbid, you clutch your chest, fall into the floor, you're going to ask for, an expert medic who knows what to do. But he's taking a cross-country flight and banging on the cockpit door and telling the pilot how to, take off and land the plane. When the stakes are high enough, everybody's happy to take a step back and let the experts do their job. When it comes to nutrition and health and performance and training, everyone's an expert, right? Everyone's got an opinion, and everyone believes that their opinion is just as good as somebody else's fact. And it's not the case. So I think whenever you have a fitness influencer or a wellness guru who isn't necessarily qualified in the area who's giving advice, I would always take that with a pinch of salt unless you can independently verify it. So those are a couple of red flags, a couple of quick rules of thumb, if you like, to determine if something's going to set off my bullshit detector. There are lots of other things you can do, and it gets more and more involved. But those are a few simple tricks, I guess, that you can apply to
link in bio to
make
get
your
the
life
full
a bit
page
easier.
download.
Yeah,
I just
exactly.
had this mashup of things you were saying, like someone having a heart attack on a plane and like a flight attendant saying, "Is there an influencer on the plane?
Right,
Help!"
exactly.
Quick,
No.
do we have a yoga instructor on board?
Is there a very, very attractive fitness influencer who can help?
We need
Wearing
someone with
bra.
really good genetics, please.
With high-rise leggings. Yeah, exactly. Or it's like if your car breaks down, the first thing everyone does is they call a mechanic. They don't start messing with it themselves, and they don't ever, unless they know something about the workings of the internal combustion engine, they're not going to go to the mechanic and start giving their opinion on something, because you just assume that, okay, this person's the expert. Maybe you'll get a second opinion if you don't like what they're telling you, whatever. But, and this is the problem, is when it comes to health and fitness and medical issues, we live in a society where we're experiencing the death of expertise, and that it's almost considered a virtue to ignore expert advice and to become anti-science and anti-professional. It's almost considered elitist, to talk about it, some kind
These
of
fancy
professional
doctors in their ivory towers with their evidence
exactly. Yeah, I got a lot of
bases.
stick. This time when I used to actually engage with social media, now I post and ghost. I never even scroll because it's a cesspit of nonsense and misinformation. But on Twitter, for example, I would post something and then I would engage with people who were replying. And at the time, my bio was like associate professor of whatever, applied physiology, and people were actually giving me stick because they considered that title to be elitist. And and they were actually saying that I never trust an associate professor, or I never trust somebody that works at university, I never trust somebody in authority positions. And it goes back to what I was just saying. If when the shit hits the fan, everybody's happy to step back and let the expert take center stage, but not when it comes to health and wellness and nutrition, unfortunately.
So you have a new book out, The Health and Wellness Lie, which is in some ways maybe a follow-up to your previous book, A Skeptic's Guide to Sports Science. I am curious, in the interceding years, though, you sort of mentioned this emergent anti-elite, anti-authority trend we're sort of seeing. What else has changed? What else shifted that you thought merited either an expansion or revisiting some of, or elaborating on some of the some similar topics?
Yeah, good question. Well, first of all, social media has become more and more embedded in daily life. It's now something that most kids and adults are addicted to, and social media and smartphones are symbiotic, right? They're designed to work in tandem. So you cannot, generally, people don't use social media on their desktop computers. They might do sometimes, but they're designed to work in tandem with smartphones. So if you're addicted to social media, you're addicted to your smartphone, and probably vice versa. So that has become embedded in a way that we never even predicted would be possible. So that's become more and more entrenched. Of course, we now have to contend with AI, and people are using AI chatbots like ChatGPT and all of its contemporaries more and more. That people are using chatbots in many ways in place of search engines, whereas before people would Google something, they're now turning to ChatGPT, or they're looking at the Google summary at the top of the search results. And that is an extra layer of potential misinformation. And that's changed, in the last handful of years, 3-4 years since ChatGPT first came on the scene. And I think the biggest change actually, aside from, we have new trends and new supplements and new fitness influencers and science-based fitness influencers now, that's kind of become a something that is exceptionally popular now. Whereas before you had your bog standard fitness influencer, now you have people who are leaning on their academic authority to promote what most experts consider to be unscientific advice or even pseudoscientific advice. But the main thing that's changed in the last 5 years is me and not necessarily my outlook, but my ability to communicate. And I've really studied writing as a craft, because it's something that I think is not just important as a scientist, but if you want to be a communicator. And I've read dozens of style guides and writing manuals, and really dedicated myself to becoming a better writer. And I'm not going to win, the Pulitzer Prize for nonfiction anytime soon. But I can honestly say that my ability to write classic prose has improved so considerably. And whereas the Skeptic's Guide to Sports Science, I was immensely proud of it at the time, and I'm still very proud of the content. And there is some overlap with the content of the Health Wellness Line, my writing and the way that I communicate, and the way that I actually use writing as a kind of, in terms of my understanding of the mechanics of writing and developing it as a craft, is so much better now. So it's an easier read. It's easy to digest. I like to think, hopefully, it's funny in places, and I use lots of cool analogies, and it's just a much better book in so many ways. So that I would say there's probably about a 20 25% overlap in terms of the content or in terms of the themes. But for the most part, this is a much more mainstream focused book. It tackles much more contemporary issues like the science influences, like AI, like the how social media has become embedded. And I think it's just a better read, I hope.
You wrote a piece called "The United States of Pseudoscience." This is for Skeptical Inquirer. This is just last month, I guess. And I was one of the interesting things in it was how you said that the United States basically is a huge exporter of pseudoscience, to the rest of the world, which I find not super surprised. It is super surprising in a way, but I'm wondering things like a friend of mine who lived in Italy and Switzerland for a good decade. I was there 8 years ago, probably. And he said, Americans are so obsessed with protein. Do you find that to be, and I walked down, the grocery store and I'm like, oh my God, there's like protein soda. Like it's just in
Protein
everything.
Pop-Tarts, protein water.
It's just, do you think that's true? And why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's not just the Americans. You see it a lot in the UK as well. I can't speak for every country. You see it a little bit in North. You see it everywhere, really. But yeah, it's especially in the UK and US. Just my perception. But protein has really become the cash cow of wellness in a way, because it's very easy to. We know that protein is important, and there's no research that would contradict that perspective that protein is an important macronutrient. We know that it helps to rebuild and maintain muscle tissue. If you're exercising regularly, your protein requirements go up a little bit. And so there's nothing wrong with supplementing with protein. It's somebody like me. I have a very, very conservative supplement regimen, because I know that most of the supplement research is shit and most of it's industry funded, and industry funded nutrition research is 6 times more likely to find positive results. And we were about to publish a study looking at like the rates of data fabrication in nutrition and physiology research. And it's like, it's at least 4 or 5%, and that's probably an underestimation, which is a shocking statistic, right? And then you've got supplement contamination and stuff like this. 1 in 7 over-the-counter, perfectly legal dietary supplements probably contaminated with anabolic steroids or stimulants or something else that would be flagged on a positive drugs test.
Whoa!
So
I thought you were going to say something about like heavy metals or something like that.
Well, that too, yeah. That's another issue entirely. I haven't even got to that yet.
Okay,
so that's another issue. There's oxidation, like certain brands of fish oil supplements are way over the upper limit, the upper threshold for what's considered to have an acceptable oxidation limit, which means you're literally swallowing rancid fish oil and you don't even know it, because when a fish is off, you can smell it, whereas the capsulated stuff, it's impossible to tell really.
Wow,
so people could be swallowing rats. Anyway, the point that I was making was, because I know all of this stuff from almost like an insider perspective, I have a very, very conservative supplement program, but I still use protein supplements because I'm training very, very hard. I either have very high mileage training, or at the moment I'm doing more like weightlifting just because I need a break from running. And so I use a protein supplement just because it makes it easier for me to hit my protein needs for the day. And because of that, because there's nothing in the scientific consensus that says that you don't need protein or that you shouldn't be supplementing, it's something that everybody's just jumped on the bandwagon. And to be able to advertise something as high in protein is actually a very, very modest threshold. I think in the US,
it has to have it's like 8-10 grams. Like it's not.
Yeah, it's nothing. It's very, very low. I think you can say a good source of protein if it has 10% of its calories from protein, and if it has 20% of its calories from protein, then you can say that it's high in protein. And it's they do it slightly differently in the UK. But anyway, the point is that you can label something as high in protein, and it doesn't even have to contain that much protein. It's like, it always makes me laugh when when they advertise like nuts with like a source of fiber. I say, well, everything's a source of fiber, pretty much. That doesn't mean anything to me. Or they advertise almonds like zero sugar. It's like, well, of course it's zero sugar. It's the freaking almond. What do you expect?
And like
Um,
a lot of the good research comes from like it's consumer research that it's become this like health halo of people see
uh-huh.
high protein on a Pop Tart and they're like, great, I wanted to have,
Yeah.
it becomes this like permission structure for people to eat the high protein Cheeto adjacent cheese puff thing,
Health
like
halo is absolutely the
yeah,
right term.
yeah, it
Uh,
hypnotizes us into being like, okay, I'll have the cheese puff.
Right, and it's something it's something that people can use to justify eating the Pop Tart, because it's fine for me to have a Pop Tart because it's high in protein, and it's not just like the fact that protein has an important role in helping the muscles recover, but protein is advertised as helping to, it's people feel more satiated when they have lots of protein. So it's people think that if they have a high protein diet, then that will help them to lose weight. It will help them to stay fuller for longer. And so that there are all of these other sort of marketing ploys that people can invoke protein for. But really, and it's something I touch on in the book, that the protein is an important macronutrient, but there's nothing magical about it. It's like meet your needs. And like Stu Phillips's group, and Stu Phillips is a friend, colleague of mine, and he's like the world-renowned authority on protein metabolism, especially in the muscle. And it's like that they've said that the upper limit for integration of protein into muscle protein synthesis is like 1.6 grams per kilo per day. I know you guys probably work in pounds. I can't do the conversion, but it's like that's the upper limit. 1.6 grams for every kilogram that you weigh every day. So for me, that's like, well, I don't know, 40, 150 grams of protein a day, which is quite a lot, which is why sometimes I supplement. But that's it. It's going to help you probably recover better than you would if you didn't hit your protein requirements. But that's it. There's nothing magical about it. And if you're deficient in protein, if you're not getting enough amino acids, then you might be more susceptible to picking up infections, because amino acids have a role in immune function. But that's kind of the same for almost any nutrient. If you're deficient in any nutrient, you're probably going to have a weakened immune system. So there's nothing magical about protein, but you quite rightly say it has this amazing health halo effect. And so people can advertise that and market protein to sell product, really.
And like as a millennial woman that grew up in like special K Jillian Michaels diet culture, like
Yeah.
every, like American culture particularly moves in cycles where every 10 years we decide that like we hate a certain macro. It's carbohydrate, it's fat, every 10 years we shift our obsession, but protein has been largely untouched and is sort of like escaped, so that people are like, oh, it's this like safe thing I can eat. It's the one macro that if I see it added to a thing, I'm like, awesome, great, high protein Pop Tart, love it. Like, this is good.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
what
And
my
there's a lot
body
of kind
needs.
of like, I guess, toxic masculinity and manosphere culture around it. And like we call it like bro science in the UK. I don't know if that's a term that's extended across
Mhm.
the Atlantic, but it's it's something that I remember seeing clips of, like soccer players from the 1970s. I was born in the 80s, but I remember seeing these old grainy images and videos of soccer players preparing for a match, and they're like eating like steak and eggs for breakfast because they thought the protein was the most important part of athletic performance. And then as the science has evolved, we've kind of like, well, energetically, probably carbohydrate is more important in terms of like metabolic function. But now, like you say, it goes in fits and starts, and now we've kind of come full circle, and people are back on the protein bandwagon. And it's this idea that eating steak and eggs, and people are eating like 10 eggs a day or whatever, and you've got to hit your protein demands. But yeah, even the experts, even the people who study this for a living, will say your protein's like it's important, but
But like,
it's not a world changer.
chill, guys, be
Yeah,
cool.
exactly. Just relax, relax.
So, I would love to know what you think some of the, thinking about those cycles, what are some of the most overhyped trends right now that you cover in your book? What's something that sounds sciency, maybe the bro podcasters, it sounds really good in a TikTok, it sounds really compelling in a
Mm.
podcast, but there's not a lot of there.
Everything.
That's a disappointing answer.
Literally everything is sold on massive claims, extraordinary claims, and absolutely like little to no evidence. That is wellness culture in a nutshell. It's like I can count on one hand the products or the supplements or the diets that are actually evidence based. But everything else is a trend. Everything else is a gimmick. And part of the problem is we have, I mentioned this earlier, is that we have this culture of science-based health influencers now who they're not science communicators, they're science commodifiers. So they treat science as like a series of useful tidbits, like a bit of information or a fact. And this study shows you should take this supplement. This study shows this. And it falsely represents what science is. Science is a process. Science is a process of honest, systematic inquiry where you do everything you can to eliminate bias and you maximize your chances of finding a truthful, factual outcome. But science now is like, you follow the science, you follow the evidence, you follow the facts, you follow the studies.
Do your own research.
Do your own research. And it's like, you can find a study to support any kind of assertion that you like. If you want to sell us something, I'm writing about athletic greens at the moment. To answer your question, this is something that, powdered greens is really trending hard. And it's partly because brands like Athletic Greens sponsor the Huberman Lab, and they sponsor Lex Fridman, and they sponsor Joe Rogan. Arguably 3 of the most popular, successful podcasts of all time. And, I'm doing a systematic review of the evidence, and there are 2 published human trials on AG1. 2. I think there are 4 or 5 like in vitro studies where they've done like simulated gut models and found that maybe it improves biodiversity or maybe nutritional profile, and that's saying that, and it's well tolerated and that kind of stuff. And the human studies have found that, I don't mind picking on AG1, but it seems like a good example.
Bring it.
And the human studies, for example, have found
it also tastes like something that comes out of the wrong end of a lawnmower mixed with hot aquarium. It is not good. Like, I think it would be more compelling if it was like, this tasty thing is also maybe good for you, but it tastes horrific. And
Put
also
that on the label,
science.
huh?
Yeah,
I've never tried it.
I should be in
actually.
PR. You've got to try it. It's worth it
AG1.
for that.
There you go.
I just want to interrupt you guys, and we just need to take a second to thank our sponsor, Athletic Greens, for supporting this episode.
Should have asked, actually.
So
you never know.
You can't. Editorial firewall.
To get 15% off with your code. Yeah, okay.
We're the last podcasters left that don't have Oura rings and AG1.
Oh yeah, well they're next on the agenda. But anyway, so look, there are 2 human trials, and they show like increases, changes in the microbiome, and perhaps like better nutritional status. So that was it, but basically. And not only are the findings surrogate findings, they're indirect markers. They don't show benefits in health. They don't show benefits in energy. They don't show benefits in immune function. They don't show benefits in quality of life. They don't even show benefits on nutritional, like digestive quality of life. They don't show benefits on clinical outcomes or longevity or lowering disease risk or anything like this. And of the 7 studies that have been published, every single one of them has been funded by Athletic Greens and has been co-authored by employees of the company.
Hell yeah!
Right. So we've got a product here that is making these fantastic claims. 70 plus claims on the website, all about energy and immunity and health and fatigue and so forth. And there are 7 studies, 2 in humans, and they're all funded by the manufacturer. Now, that's not to say I'm not shitting on Athletic Greens, saying Athletic Greens is useless, don't take it, doesn't work. I'm not saying that.
It's the only one. It's the only violator.
I'm just saying that this is a prime example of fantastic marketing, excellent business model, because they're sponsoring the right people, making themselves very visible, but the evidence base is really weak. And that is health and fitness in a nutshell. It's like that for almost every single product.
Great.
So,
how do we follow that?
Well, anyway,
it's
been nice.
Great.
But you've also written a lot about how the placebo question makes a lot of sports psychology, physiology research nearly unfalsifiable, right? So how can people navigate that? Because I can't remember who said it, but the first rule is you must not be easy to fool, and the easiest person to fool is You.
Yeah, that's Feynman, Richard Feynman. Which is such it's a wonderful quote. The first rule is that you must not fool yourself, and you're the easiest person to fool.
There it is.
That's Ryman's first rule, and it's like, yeah, that's critical thinking 101. You rightly say that the placebo effect is really important, especially in sport. Not just in sport, I would say in medicine, right? Because placebo, it really arrived on the scene as a way for physicians to control the expectation or to manage the expectations of their patients when they didn't have painkillers, they didn't have anesthesia, they gave them some kind of pill or an injection and told them that it would null their pain, and the placebo effect, this expectation and belief did the rest. So in that context, it's like, wow, that's really powerful and very, very important at a time when we didn't have any kind of meaningful way to manage patient pain during whatever treatments and surgeries. And then it now has a huge role in sports performance. And I would say in a sport like ultra running or trail running, where so much of your performance is dependent on what's going on in your mind, then and also in elite sport, even if you can improve performance by 0.1%, that could be the difference between gold and silver. We were operating in a sporting world where the competitive margins are getting smaller and smaller. And so, yeah, that placebo effect can be really, really beneficial. It's a bit of a slippery slope, though, because, on the one hand, if you're a coach, for example, and you give an athlete a supplement and they know that the supplement isn't going to work. A better example is KT tape or kinesio tape.
Yeah.
And this is something that like every physio that I know applies kinesio tape to their athletes. And they all pretty much know, the physios, that they call it placebo tape. They know that it does nothing, really. Okay. And excuse me. And if you look at the literature, there are like at least 4 or 5 different systematic reviews and meta-analyses, all done by independent groups. And they all conclude the same thing, that this doesn't really work in the way that it's claimed. It's no better than regular taping. And most of the benefits are a function of the placebo effect. But if it gives an athlete confidence and it helps them to, even if it mitigates their pain, even if only in their head, or it helps them to get through a race when otherwise they would have, thrown in the towel, then that's meaningful. So it's a very difficult, it's a contentious area, because on the one hand, you don't want to lie to your athletes, and we're all seekers of the truth. But by the same token, placebo has very powerful psychobiological effects, and we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. So it's a very difficult kind of ethical conundrum. It's a bit of a gray area. And maybe I can throw a question back to you. Like, would either of you use something that maybe you knew only worked in the power of placebo? Would you mind if like a high level coach gave you something that they knew was only going to work in your mind?
I have issues with someone else recommending it without that context, because my next question is like, well, why is this person recommending it? And what are the trade-offs? Like, almost KT tape maybe isn't the worst trade-offs, right? Like, it's not crazy expensive. People aren't turning themselves inside out to apply KT tape and like selling their like house and car to finance it. But with a lot of supplements, I think that thinking gets extended to, well, what's the harm? It's natural, or like, what's the harm? And then, or like with protein, and then your kidneys and liver end up with a bunch of homework, and you've spent, there's marginal gains at play, but there's also marginal losses of like, could I spend that time sleeping better, or like managing my stress, or like meditating, or like figuring out how to like touch my toes for the first time in 6 months? And I think that it's not always a zero sum, but I'm always hesitant to commit to anything that doesn't have like a mechanical explanation, because I do feel like there's so many, as a busy person without bottomless resources, like there are trade-offs for me.
I'm just going to shout out Bluey Band-Aids on 3-year-olds. Even if there's
the latest sponsor of the,
if there's no visible wound, it doesn't matter. I just put it on my 3-year-old and we're good. It's total placebo, but it's fine. Yeah.
Well, and this is kind of the thing. It's like, well, you use that phrase, what's the harm? And with something like K-tape or kinesio tape is the product. You have KT tape is the brand. Kinesio tape is the other brand. It's all very confusing. But the harm is, okay, well, if it does nothing, then it's no big deal. I guess you could argue that if it gives an athlete a false sense of security, then they might do something or race or do something in training that they might not otherwise have done. But okay, that aside, kinesia tape is relatively benign. The problem that I have with it is that there's no way to restrict placebo products to sport and fitness and kinesia tape. If somebody believes in the true power of placebo, it's only going to be a matter of time before they use it to treat something that needs a real medical intervention. You know, like as an example, we know that like I always talk about Michael Phelps and cupping, and he used cupping, and I think still uses cupping. It even has his own branded device now to alleviate muscle soreness. Yeah, convenient that, right? He's been using it for decades. Like he needed the money. Anyway, let's not get judgmental. The point is he uses it to alleviate muscle soreness. But then there are certain cupping associations that promote cupping to relieve asthmatic symptoms, right? Well, those are two very different things, because if you use cupping to alleviate muscle soreness and it doesn't work, okay, big deal. You remain sore. Okay, your risk, the cupping therapy is inherently risky in itself, but I cannot state this clearly enough. Do not use cupping therapy to alleviate your asthmatic symptoms. If you have asthma and it needs, it probably may need medication, go and see your physician, go and see a respiratory therapist. We don't want people using ancient Chinese therapies to treat asthma, or like whole body cryotherapy is another one that I've written about in the past, where people stand in freezing gas for minutes at a time, and a lot of professional sports teams use it again to facilitate recovery, alleviate muscle soreness. But there are some private clinics who promote it to treat disease and illness and as a treatment for cancer and so forth. So it's like it's a slippery slope, and if we endorse or advocate for placebo products in one category, it's very difficult to restrict it to just these benign interventions. There are going to be downstream effects of that, essentially.
I have one last question for you, and then I'll hand it to Brendan. But I feel like for me, one of my fears is there's a version of skepticism that can almost become its own dogma. I love reading your writing and it really resonates. And then I'm like, oh no, I really love reading this and it really resonates. And I can see myself potentially descending into this lovely echo chamber of me questioning other people's echo chambers. Mm-hmm. Nothing works. Everything's a placebo. A lot of the stuff is really hard to study, hard to measure, hard to improve. How do you stay open and stay rigorous and stay sane?
Yeah, it's really difficult, and it's a balancing act, because you can easily find yourself stepping over the boundary from being skeptical to being cynical, and just dismissing things out of turn because somebody's hit a tripwire and they've sprung a red flag and you can switch off to it. But being a good skeptic, being a good critical thinker means, and again, I'll use another Feynman quote here, it's keeping an open mind, but not so open that your brains fall out. And again, that's like, for me, it's very, very easy to dismiss these new products and new trends, but you have to approach each and every one of them with this honest inquiry and be like, okay, start from this neutral position and understand your own biases. And that's like the first thing that you should do in being a good critical thinker and being a good skeptic, is not looking at everyone else and looking at their echo chambers and looking at how they make their decisions, but look at how you make your own decisions and understanding your own biases. And how do I react when I see this thing online? And what are my personal sensations? Do I feel myself getting angry or fearful or sad or happy when I see some Instagram reel that triggers me, or I see an advert for I see a commercial for something? And how does that make me feel? Really, like a lot of personal reflection to keep your own biases in check. And that way you can never eliminate bias, you can only mitigate it. But that way you can approach each new trend and each new thing with a fresh set of eyes, and keep your mind open, but not so open. Not so open that your brain falls out. It's tricky to do. Like it takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. But yeah, good skeptics understand how they make decisions and understand their own thinking. That's the best place to start.
Ask your doctor if critical thinking is right for you.
Yeah. Well, a lot of doctors could do with more critical thinking. Like, this is not something that is taught at medical school. It's not taught in universities. Like if you have a college education in like philosophy of science, maybe you'll touch on critical thinking stuff. But I've done 3 science degrees and I never did any critical thinking. I never had any critical thinking education at all. I'm just like completely self-taught, reading books and watching lectures and reading papers and this kind of stuff. So and they don't have critical thinking classes at medical school. And this is how you end up with medical doctors who are also homeopaths, or you have this is how you get astronomers who believe in astrology, or exercise scientists who advocate for cupping and acupuncture. Being a good scientist and being a good critical thinker can be mutually exclusive, so we've got to make sure that they are closer together.
Yeah. Is there a critical thinking influencer?
Oh, there
I think
are loads,
he's here.
actually.
I think this is
Well,
Nick.
I like to kind of teach broad decision-making skills, like in my area, like in exercise science. And obviously I write a lot about critical thinking. That was a big difference between the Skeptic's Guide to Sports Science, which was much more of like a critical thinking book, and I talked about decision-making and logical fallacies and stuff. The Health and Wellness Lie is a much more kind of integrated approach of looking at wellness, and it's still got this thread of critical thinking, but it's not like a thesis on critical thinking per se. But there are lots of like fantastic people who are doing who are doing the work that I can't be that guy on TikTok and Instagram who's doing the videos and doing the reels, and I don't have the time, I don't have the expertise, I don't understand how it works, honestly. Like how people come up with these like amazing videos and like the graphics. Like if I post an Instagram story, I have to get my wife to help me. Like, is this what button do I press it? Like I just can't do it. But there are amazing people who are doing that stuff. Like Melanie Tracer King is a friend of mine. She's Thinking is Power. She has a great she does lots of critical thinking content. This is Mallory. She has a great Instagram. Just plugging my friends here, but like she does lots of like wellness debunking stuff and pointing out some of the flaws in wellness rhetoric, and she does all that stuff online. Again, she does all like the cool little videos and stuff that I just don't have the patience to be able to figure out. So there are these kinds of resources online. You just have to look for them, really. And like I said, I've sort of taken a step back from social media. I still post regularly, but I don't engage with the platforms because I value my mental health.
Smart.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Somebody said to me recently, so like, Nick, do you like I posted a comment to your thing, you didn't reply, and I was like, I don't read the comments. Are you mental? Like, I'm not, I value my mental health. I'm not going to read the comments. I never read the comments.
No,
especially yours.
Especially yours. Yeah, exactly. Nothing good ever comes from scrolling through the responses. I think you're
whatever
a little bit
kink
safer,
that
maybe,
is. I want nothing to do with that level of like.
Well, I see like serious experts, very well respected experts in their field, getting into these Twitter feuds, and they devolve into these ridiculous, petty slanging matches, and like it's not a good look.
At least it always does change people's minds, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're guaranteed to find like a happy resolution, and everybody agrees to respectfully disagree. Yeah, it's just and I've been there myself, and I'm like, I don't want that in my life. I need more for myself. So I think you've got to, as with everything, you've got to figure out how to use these things as tools, and don't let them use you as a tool. Don't be a tool, is what I'm saying.
It's a perfect place to end this.
That's
thank
beautiful.
you so much, Nick. That was super, super fun. Thanks so much for all of your insights and sending us to go forth and think more critically, hopefully. This week's featured race takes the whole idea of a finish line and quietly throws it out the window. The Ode to Laz Michigan Backyard Ultra goes down Saturday, July 18th in Holly, Michigan, tucked into 8,000 acres of Holly State Recreation Area. The format is beautifully simple and a bit diabolical. A 4.167-mile loop, every hour, on the hour. Run, rest a bit, line up, rinse, and repeat. The only way to win is to be the last runner standing, which is exactly why their motto is finishing last means the most. By day, you're on technical single track. Once it hits 9 p.m., you switch to a closed park road under the beautiful Michigan stars, then back to the trail come morning. And here's the part that I really love. This isn't just great for grizzled ultra vets, though if you're an experienced runner, there's certainly something for you here. But if you've ever been backyard ultra curious, but weren't totally ready to hand over your entire soul, the Oak Flats 3-hour option lets you dip in for 1, 2, or 3 loops to see how it feels. Bring your crew or go solo. Camp on site and crack a beer at the finish. It's a championship-affiliated race too, so the winner walks away with the silver ticket towards USA National Backyard Team. Registration closes Thursday, July 16th. Sign up at ultrasignup.com. Thanks for joining us on the Trailhead. If you love this episode, leave us a review. Share it with your trail crew and make sure to subscribe so you never miss an adventure. Give us a follow on Instagram at TrailheadPod. And you can reach us anytime at trailhead@ultrasignup.com. We'd love to hear your stories, questions, guest ideas, or just to say hi. And don't forget to check out all of the shows in the Ultra Podcast Network. We're building something special, and it's just for you. We'll see you every other week, right here on the Trailhead.